Hey everybody, this is Professor Jason Snart. I'm going to be your instructor for our very quick first 5-week English 1130, which is Introduction to Literature section. You might notice that I'm in the course shell here for 1130, the Net 05 section. There's actually another section that I'm teaching. It's exactly the same setup and everything. So if you happen to notice that and think that I might have recorded the wrong thing or you're watching the wrong video or something, you're not. You might just be in the other Net 20 section or whatever the number is. I can't even remember what it is exactly. Okay, so this is just a way for me to kind of say hello and really to do a brief course orientation to show you how things are set up, kind of what you can expect and all that sort of stuff. One of the things that I'm really conscious of in like designing online classes is really thinking in terms of like what in our field is called UX, or the user experience. In fact, web design in commercial organizations depends on UX as well. So Amazon, right, is deeply invested in user experience so that when you go to Amazon to shop for something or do something, it's as easy as possible for obvious reasons, right? We don't often think about the designer of a course like me and the user of the course like you in terms of those UX principles or user experience principles, but I actually do. So I don't have the latitude or obviously the resources and skill that like a big organization or corporation could bring to design or web design. But I definitely design in terms of like ease of navigation, simplicity and transparency, and let's get all of the getting oriented and figuring stuff out from the technical end out of the way as early as possible so that you can focus on the course content and not like, where do I find this, or what does this mean, or where do I go to do this? So that's kind of my aim in terms of our course design. So you'll notice too, there's a bunch of menu items that are hidden from you. Just ignore those as you're looking at them on my screen here. Sometimes they're just extra stuff, nothing that you'll have to deal with. So again, if you see those in my video here, but don't see them in your version of the course menu, don't worry, I'm well aware of that. So I've tried to keep things as streamlined as possible, and I have a really, what I think is going to be a really cool setup for our course here that I'll show you in just a second. Some of the things that we'll go through here are more like bigger picture things. Maybe you just know about them as a course menu item, but we're not necessarily even using them on a regular basis. So the syllabus is pretty typical. You'll notice that almost all of the content that I've built, like assignment instructions or readings, handouts kind of things, are built as actually Google Docs that are embedded, so they're going to have this internal scrolling frame. So always make sure, obviously, that you don't inadvertently scroll and there's actually more to the text. Usually you would see that, and of course if you're reading it, right, you would realize that you need to scroll some more. So always be scrolling through the whole thing. So again, syllabus, pretty typical stuff as far as a course description, our various objectives and topical outline, basically like the things that we'll want to cover as part of our class. When it comes to this kind of thing, any 1130 that you would take, whether it's a face-to-face, net version like ours, 16-week, 8-week, 5-week like ours, which is really fast, it would all have the same objectives and topics to cover, and of course the description. So these aren't particular to just our section, or they're not just things that I want to cover as an individual instructor. These are things that we have programmatically at COD agreed that every 1130 class will cover. So you can read through those just on your own. The rest of it is basically like overarching policy type stuff. Nothing that's going to be really surprising, like, hey, don't plagiarize. Ooh, shocker, right? Some notes about incomplete, satisfactory fail, netiquette, which is really important. Again, just being respectful of one another in our communications, even though we'll never actually be in real time together, either via like a video conference thing or certainly in a classroom. Info about access and accommodation. And then the big piece that is kind of missing from what you might expect in a typical syllabus is our due date schedule. That is all built directly into Blackboard. So the units is the link that will take you to all the work for the class. And obviously the due dates will take you through when all of that work is due. So the thing that I will probably like repeat ad nauseum here and that I want to stress up front is that we're doing a 3-credit class that if you took it in the 16-week format, it might meet like Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 3 hours, or for an hour roughly each time. So we'll call it like 3 hours a week. If you were doing it in the net version, in again that 16-week, you'd sort of be looking at roughly that same or probably a little bit more time commitment, that number of hours per week. So in the 5-week format, we're cutting that 16 weeks basically into like a third. So that like triples the time on task. So I don't think it will literally take people like 9 hours or whatever every week to do our course. That would be a lot. But it is going to be a really significant time commitment for our really brief 5 weeks together. So to be successful, and again, you probably already know this, but you really have to focus and be intentional about it. You really have to stay on top of things, be aware of what's being required in every single unit, budget time for doing the readings for the class. I think that is going to be the biggest time commitment. Not even really like producing the written work for the class. It's going to be just getting through all of that, the readings to do. So I've tried to keep it as streamlined and efficient as possible, but we can't really cheat and just do like one poem and one short story and maybe a play and call that an introduction to literature. It's just not really going to cut it. So that's going to be the biggest time commitment, I think, is just doing the readings for each of the units as we move through the various genres for our Intro to Lit class. My advice to people is to block out time on your schedule that obviously is attending to the due dates and how those work. It could be flexible within each of the days about, are you doing your work kind of later in the day, earlier, mid, maybe chunking that out into smaller blocks of time that work for you. But write that down in your day planner or make it a part of your digital calendar or whatever, just as if you were taking a real face-to-face class. So you wouldn't be in class on Monday from 9 to 11 or whatever it might be, and also schedule a dentist appointment or be at work or some other like physical commitment where you couldn't literally do those two things at the same time. So try to treat your net class in the same way. It needs to have its own dedicated time for you to be doing that work. Don't let it just, when I do all my other stuff, then I'll get to the net class or that kind of a deal. It's going to require a more intentional commitment of time on your part. So as far as our due dates are concerned, hopefully I have all of the actual days and the numbers right here, but I'll double check that. So the official start of the term is June 1st. I'm going to open our class a little bit early in case people want to pop in and kind of get that orientation, get their feet wet a little bit before necessarily jumping into the work. But notice that our due date structure, because every unit is going to have like an initial sort of post or work for you to do, and then a comment or reply component. We have 2 separate due dates for every single unit. And there's not a huge gap between them, but at least there's something. So you're not trying to like finish work and reply to other people's work basically at the same time. And also keep in mind that the earlier people can get this kind of like initial work done, the sooner or the easier it is to do that reply component. It's not a self-paced class. Don't finish it all as fast as you possibly can, because A, you run the risk of forgetting the reply piece, which is really important, and B, I do regular video announcements here, which, unlike this one, have much more like content-specific stuff. So you don't want to be getting out in front of that stuff in case there's material in the video announcement that kind of guides you through the assignments for each of those weeks. So just follow the due dates as they're laid out, staying on top of them, but not getting out in front of them. And again, understand our kind of like double due date structure. So I've kept it pretty regular, right? That Thursday, Friday setup across our 5 weeks. It goes really fast. It's really intensive. So you just stay focused as much as you can for those 5 weeks. And then in the blink of an eye, it's pretty much over. Everything else in our course menu is pretty self-explanatory. You can access your grades as we start to compile those. You can contact me. Email's the best. I'll get that even on my phone. Even if I don't reply fully right away, I'll at least like try to acknowledge receipt of an email. like on my phone, if it requires me to get into Blackboard and check a grade or check a unit or a link or something like that, I try to be as responsive as possible. If you want to use the email thing, the libraries send an email. Again, not probably stuff that you're going to do a ton with. Even the syllabus, once you've read it once, will probably not really need that again. It's really our units, where the work is, and of course the due dates that are going to be your main go-tos when you come into the class. So let's take a look at a typical unit here. Notice that there's only 5, right? It's a pretty limited unit list for a whole 3-credit class. So there's lots to do in each of the pieces here. Again, I hope it's going to be fun and interesting. We don't write any essays, so it's not like an essay-based class. Read story, write essay, read poem, write essay. That's just not like an interesting way of engaging with literature to me, either from your perspective, I would imagine, and from mine. So hopefully it's going to be a little more interesting. So let's get to it here. Okay, so because we're just getting settled into our first unit here, I've provided an overview. I'm not sure I'm going to do that for every unit. It might be kind of like overkill and just clutter after we get the sense of it. But I want to provide almost like a checklist to make sure people are looking for and kind of understanding each of the things in a typical unit. So we are going to use a tool called Padlet, I said that weird. Which I'm going to show you in just a second. And again, this is stuff that I'm not going to go through in detail here in the video piece, but you really need to make sure, just like you would show up to class on a regular basis, that you're reading this content in the class. It's not like an assignment, it's just information about how this foundational tool for our class is going to work. This is the one we're going to use for almost all of your work across all of our units, so it's really important to get comfortable right away. And again, I'll take a look at that in just a second, but you can read at more carefully when you get a second to. There's also information about like grading here. Again, the majority of your grade is going to come from your work in the Padlet tool, posting based on initial prompts that I'm providing, but then commenting / replying to your classmates. So again, I'm not going to go through it here, but it's really important that you take some time to read that stuff. Here's our first assignment. Notice, like I said, it's actually an embedded Google Doc that provides you with the materials, what to do, what to look for, how to do it, right? Little screen captures that I've built in. Obviously super important stuff in its own text box, bold, highlighted, and clearly something to pay attention to. And then a link to the Padlet, which is actually where the work for the class, where you're going to do it. And again, I'll come back to that. All of our reading assignments are linked to generally PDFs. Because I'm doing it this way, right? 0 textbook cost, which is nice, but links aren't always as stable as we'd like. So if by any chance you find a link that doesn't work, right? For whatever reason, someone's taken it offline, just make sure that you Google the short story and the author name so you find the right one and do the reading. So it's not really necessary that you read it from the link that I provide, just as long as you've read the right story by the right author so that you're speaking the same language as everyone else in the class. There are a few reading comprehension quizzes. They're usually like 5 to 10 questions long. They are a portion of your grade, but pardon me, they're certainly not something that I value over more of the the written interpretation or response that you're providing in the Padlet. Again, I'll talk about that in a sec. So clearly you can have your book open, right? The PDF open. Most of the quizzes I think are just set up to do once, so make sure that you're taking your time, right? That's kind of our watch phrase for this class. But you can have the PDF open. It's not like a timed test or some sort of proctored thing where you can't, it's not testing your memory of the stories. In fact, I think they're most valuable because what they tend to do is draw your attention to important pieces or moments within a text. It's not just random trivia that doesn't really matter for the overall meaning of the story. So ideally, they're just helping you with understanding and interpretation. Here we have what I would call a handout, a digital handout. It's just material for the class that I'll record actually a video, quasi-lecture, I suppose you could call it, even though it's going to be fairly informal, like what I'm doing here that goes along with it. And then again, another assignment that's pretty short and straightforward, but it's embedded here in Blackboard again, just so you're aware of it and that you don't inadvertently skip over it, with reminders about the fact that we have that comment piece to it as well. So just about all of our course content, whether it's links to readings, quizzes, conceptual like handout material, is all going to be here in Blackboard. But your work, and there you'll always have the links to this, is all going to happen here in this Padlet tool. So Padlet is like a digital corkboard, and you can't see a ton of it, like there's more off to the right. There will be more down to the bottom as we fill out these columns. You'll see there's a little overview of how it's all going to work. Here's our Unit 1 that we're going to do, the Introduce Yourself assignment, and then the Elements of Short Fiction assignment. The text of the assignment is actually duplicated here in Padlet because it's fairly straightforward. For other more like involved assignments, there's going to be more in Blackboard and just kind of like a quick note here. But we're going to do all of our work in the column or columns that I've set up for each of the units. So obviously to do the Introduce Yourself, you would scroll down to the bottom of the column, which is just off the screen capture here. You're going to see the little plus icon, and that's how you would add your post for whatever that particular assignment is. It doesn't really matter what you title things, but I would get in the habit of like Unit 1 and then whatever your name is. The one downside, with the upside to Padlet, is that you don't have to sign up for an account. You can if you want, and it's actually kind of beneficial because it automatically will assign your name to your posts, which is helpful for you and for me. But if you don't do that, you can just start right in. But the only way that I can grade your work is by searching the Padlet for your posts and replies by name, and that's how I'm going to do it. So it's really important that if you post, when you post, every time include your name as it's given in Blackboard. So whatever your like official name is, not a nickname, not like I had one student whose official name was what was it, like Derek Jackson, but he just went by DJ. So I had to remember to search by DJ so that I could match up his Padlet work to the Blackboard gradebook, but that's really hard to do multiplied across basically the 50 plus people that we have in the two of the English 1130 sections that are going right now. We're all going to be using the same Padlet, so you're probably going to be seeing people who aren't technically in your same section in here posting in the Padlet, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's not like you see folks in class. We're all just going to be part of that same cohort of English 1130 students. But with that many people doing that many posts and that many replies, it's going to get really wild and messy if I can't easily find like who's doing what. So we'll just do this. And then you would type your response here. But I'm really going to encourage people, even kind of like letting it feed into the grading part of it, to use the features that are provided in Padlet that aren't just basic text. So you can upload things, you can link things, you can like search or Google things. But here's the really cool part, is you can use the snap thing to do like a camera shot. So it's not like you have to upload a separate image that you've taken. And if you open the three dots here, you get all of these great cool features that are so seamless and easy to use on your smartphone phone or your mobile device, obviously on the computer like I'm recording here. And I'm really going to encourage people to do brief video recordings. You can even do audio. There's cool like drawing features. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do beyond just simple text. But obviously, this is the basis for the entirety of the work that we're going to do for our class. Working in the correct column based on the assignment that's going to be provided, again, in the Blackboard unit, following the link, finding the right column, adding your initial post, and remember that kind of brings us back to our due date structure here. Any initial work is always due that first due date. So notice that there's multiple things to do here in Unit 1, Introduce Yourself, but also the Elements of Short Fiction assignment. Both of those things are due, those initial posts are due by that first due date. It's not like one is due on the first and one is the second. They're both due on the first due date. And then that second due date gives you time to do your replies to classmates, which you can do by just using the Add Comment tool. I would add my comment here. Again, clearly going to be more developed. And then just, because I'm signed in, it automatically adds my name. That's the nice part of signing up for the free account, which you're more than welcome to do, but you don't have to. And then I'll figure out how to clean that up in just a sec. Okay. All right, so Padlet is going to be the main kind of canvas or corkboard that we are doing all of our work on. So it's really important that, probably new to a lot of people, really easy to use, not a steep learning curve, but getting in there and kind of learning what the buttons do and just remembering things like including your name, remembering to do the reply component, remembering to obviously post in the right column. I've used 2 columns because we have so many people. I didn't want the column itself to get so long. You were just scrolling like forever. It's probably still going to feel that way because we have so many people, but it's the same prompt, right? You don't have to do the assignment twice. You don't have to do it in the first one. You could be the first one to post in the second. And when you do your comments, even if, let's say, I've posted my initial post in the column 1, here, the first column for Unit 1, I can easily do comments to other posts in a mixture of the columns or in column 2 instead of 1. So you're not just locked into one of them. And again, it's not like this is for one section and this column is for the other section of the class. It's all going to get mixed together, which I think is going to be even more interesting because it's more sort of like perspectives and variety that you're going to see. Okay, so long story short, units, super important. That's where all the work is. Due dates, super important since this is not a self-paced class, keeping on top of things. Staying aware that there's just like a lot to do in each unit. Again, Unit 1 being a good example where you have a couple of assignments, but also the readings themselves are just like gonna take a while and you'll have to spend some time with them. 3 short stories, none of them super duper long, but again, there's no way to kind of rush through those without doing a poor job, and hopefully nobody wants to do that. And then just getting a hang for how the Padlet tool works. All right, so I think that about covers it as far as course overview. You'll notice that each of the units as we move through our various topics are going to have kind of the same setup with linked readings, some quizzes. Not every work has a quiz, just some of them. And then, of course, our assignment that will use our Padlet tool again. Okay. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. Kind of a longer video announcement. Most of them will be much shorter, but I consider this course content. So if you're skipping these, it's like skipping class. It's not a recipe for success or for doing the best that you can do. But I'm going to leave it here for now. I'll post again for Unit 1 and particularly for the Elements of Short Fiction handout that's in Unit 1. But by all means, have a look around. Click into the various things just so you have a sense of like what is important and what's maybe a look at once and maybe doesn't figure in so much after that. And then, of course, if you see any mistakes, links don't work, or if you just have basic questions, by all means, reach out to me. And otherwise, I will be talking with everyone pretty soon.